Okay, the way this session works is quite straightforward. We'll take a question from the audience, put it to a panel. This is your chance to get involved. So first question.
This is maybe a little bit slightly unrelated to the cloud, but it's just an interesting idea. I'm just wondering if you gave it some thought. Has there been any thought for the accounting, for Gary, actually, question for Gary, to kind of commoditize the accountants themselves, to make it kind of Amazon Mechanical Turk kind of idea? Is that something that you're looking at all, and integrate that with the cloud?
So I think that there are certain components of the way that we see our service working that will certainly computerize or automate some of the manual work that accounting and bookkeeping firms do, specifically around bank reconciliation and banking, where there's large volumes of data and it's predictable, and we can set up rules to do that. But we would invest in that, and we build those tools not to make accountants redundant, but actually to free them up to do the more interesting things.
But they'd still be used in that way. It's just that you wouldn't have necessarily one accountant allocated per customer, but you'd have a pool of accountants which can take up tasks as required.
I guess that could work. We always think there's would require to be a degree of intimacy that the financial professional would require to have about the data, about the client, in order to really infer any kind of value or advisory guidance. So we think that certainly around the transaction processing side, that's right for commoditization, that's right for computerization to streamline it. But we think there's absolutely still a role, in fact, it's even more important for that financial professional to practice what they learn to be an accountant for in the first place, which is being that financial professional, not a data entry person.
It is an interesting idea, though, because what you're talking about, essentially professionally crowdsourcing answers for the audience. Now, I've got an accounting firm that I've worked with in the past. They've got about 200 partners, and they're a traditional bunch of accountants in a building. They started a cloud-based service for small and medium-sized businesses. Somebody like that, with that type of scale, working with tools like yours, could actually start to deliver that type of model. So I don't think it's necessarily your business, but it's your business with your partners that I could see something like that work, because this is the real collaboration capabilities that cloud are actually enabling us to do.
I was going to say, why kind of London stroke UK and the cloud?
I don't think it's true.
So in terms of, but why sort of London or the UK in terms of successful cloud businesses?
Why are they here successful? Or
why do you think they'll be able to be successful here? I mean, there's businesses that are kind of building cloud businesses in the UK stroke London.
I think the flippant answer would be, because if they don't, they'll die. Because everybody eventually will die, because this is where it's all going. I mean, that's a little bit flippant, but the reality is we're moving away from traditional computing models, and the other companies need to either grow to take advantage of it, grow to exploit it, or grow in spite of it. And I think the first two are probably a lot more productive than the last. The economies of scale, the capabilities that you can get. We can, while some of the way you were describing things sound a little too easy, which I know you're just at the surface of it, it is that easy in comparison to what it was. It's not that you don't need an IT department, you just don't have to hire them. It's like leasing a car. You're leasing the mechanic that goes with the car. They take care of the service and the maintenance. That's what happens with your cloud.
But was your question, why are businesses in London going to be successful if they're on the cloud, or why are successful businesses centered in London? I didn't quite understand.
So you're building a cloud business in London. I mean, what does the UK stroke London have in a sort of cloud context to differentiate and allow us to be successful?
I wouldn't say it does. I think there are many successful businesses growing in the United States and in Asia. Exactly, the cloud is a geographical resource, right? It's one of the beauties of it. And I myself source data from a cloud provider which is based in Los Angeles and has another office in New York. So I don't think your statement is necessarily correct.
I think I'd add that wherever you are, if you don't recognize there's an opportunity to build or use new cloud-based systems or become a cloud-based startup, than somebody else will outside the UK. If the cloud means that development and delivery of products and services is a little more abstract, then location is no longer important, then that means that if we're not building it in the UK or in whatever country that you're in, and my parent company is based in New Zealand, as an example, then there are companies across the world that, because it's so easy to start building new products and delivering those services, will be competing with you. So I don't think it's a geographical thing. I think you have to do it, regardless of where you are.
Just picking up on that point about the geographical aspect of it, I kind of disagree with you on one particular point of that, and that is the regulation aspect. Because obviously finance is highly regulated, and the regulators, I think we talked a little bit earlier, one of the speakers, about regulators having to catch up. When they do catch up, they will put certain restrictions or certain parameters around what can and can't be done. So I'd like kind of your views on geographically where we think it might work with the regulators, and who might kind of forge ahead and in a geographical location and make it much more friendly than other locations.
Yeah, so this is a complicated problem, and I think that my understanding is that between Europe and the US at least, the Safe Harbor Treaty does actually at least allow us to have some degree of data sharing, which also conforms with the EU directive on, for example, personal data. So, steps are being made in the right direction, but you're absolutely right. Some harmonization needs to take place. But I look at it rather like this. The cloud is more or less an inevitability. The harmonization will need to take place. It's merely a question of how long that's going to take to happen.
I think from the regulation aspect as well, I mean, a lot of the rules are already in place. So when you mention things, sorry, I just drew a blank on the treaty. Thank you, Safe Harbor. I just wrote about it last week. The problem that we have with all of these treaties is none of them are designed to actually deal with anything remotely like the capabilities that we have today, the volume of data, the speed that things move, and the requirement for companies to start to move. So PRISM and the National Security Agency and Tempora here in the UK and whatever the French are calling theirs, these are all based on and predicated on laws that aren't really able to deal with the answers. So they're going down to the basics about a security thing, and we can go into discussions about that on another day. But I think you're going to have centralized pockets of regulation like the EU, America, Canada, Australia, and Asia, and you're going to have a lot more countries that are going to be joining together a little bit more to get to start to get the understanding of the quality and value that they can get from cloud. The EU has it wrong right now. We've got this lovely lady named Neelie Kroes who, every time she talks about it, she kind of gets it wrong, right? She talks one time about how the private cloud, it's personal. Nobody can touch it. Everything is safe. You lock it up like a little storage locker, and you go back and it's there. And I mean, we know that's not quite the case. And the quality of the cloud, as I said earlier to you, they're not all equal. Regulation is a governmental thing about what's in the cloud, not the cloud itself. And I think that's the big differentiator that we have to be careful about.
But business have to operate within the regulations, which means they have to operate within the context of those regulations, not what's ultimately possible out in the world, but what they're allowed to do in the real world, which has got the regulators telling you what you can and what you can't do.
I think one other point to make is that someone like Windows Azure, for example, has been given a sign-off by both the European directive and also by the United States that they comply with personal data regulations. So for companies which are developing with Windows Azure, you can develop under that umbrella to an extent.
So I have an anecdote that supports my view that the smart regulators will actually see this as an opportunity to help rather than hinder.
Is that not an oxymoron?
Well, yeah. And so in New Zealand, the equivalent of HMRC is IRD, and they had a ruling, a rule that if you're a New Zealand-based company and you're storing your financial records outside of New Zealand, and you were in breach of some regulatory compliance, that your data had to be within New Zealand, because they hadn't conceived of cloud-based services. And the IRD did the smart thing and actually made an amendment to that regulation, said, no, we're cool with that as long as it's with a trusted provider, then actually we'll accommodate that within the regulatory framework. So I think that the smart regulators will see this as an economic benefit to their taxpayers rather than something to hinder. But it's a complex area.
Just one last point on that as well is that we've been putting data in storage in hosted places for a lot longer than we've been calling it cloud. So if I go back 10 years, I was working for a company called Capita, and we did the Criminal Records Bureau was one of the big jobs that we did. Another one was some of the major councils around London. Both the town council and the Criminal Records Bureau had straight regulations that all of the data had to stay in country. We had lots of options to put things in other places. We knew what the rules were, and we adhered to those rules. The big problem today is with cloud is a lot of people put stuff in the cloud and they don't know where the hell it is. They don't know that by signing up for Amazon it's gone to Ireland or Botswana or somewhere, right? Nobody actually knows where the stuff is unless you've actually done your homework and involved some technical people to advise you, whether they're business advisors or the technology people, to ask the questions, because you are responsible for regulation. You are responsible for being compliant for your data, not your cloud provider. So I think that's a critical difference today that we have to look at.
With a cloud-based product, how do you decide how to evolve it? Do you listen to your customers 50% of the time, 80%, not at all, have your own vision, like some of them, don't like others?
100% of the time. Certainly for a startup like this, like mine, also where the technology is new, the approach is new, the feedback on how the application is supposed to behave, on the efficiency, the sort of calculations that people are looking for, the sort of risks in my case that they want to see, the sort of reports, is really critical to making sure that the product is scalable across a reasonably large client base. So yeah, all the time.
So in some respects, no different from any other software business where you will be certainly getting input from your customers, anecdotally usually. We've done a few things to use this new world to our advantage there. So on top of just getting feedback from customers, and there's a degree to which you, if you ask I think Henry Ford said if I'd asked my customers what they'd wanted, they would all have said a faster horse. And so you have to filter that and put it in context. But absolutely being responsive to customer feedback when you've got something wrong is really key. And so we've had a couple of things where we called a specific design element or a new piece of functionality in our product, and we shipped it, and the feedback was a negative one from customers. People were on a blog the day we shipped it saying, "I can't believe you guys have done this," and absolutely got into debate on our blog with our customers. Okay, how do we get this wrong? How do we fix it? And we try to justify it. We got a lot of feedback, so we're not buying any justification. And we then took on board the feedback, and by the end of the week, we had actually addressed and we'd fixed the challenge, and to the extent that it looked like we actually screwed up deliberately to make it look how quickly we could respond to feedback. But that wasn't the case. And then we have a community where we allow people, we give customers 5 votes on a piece of functionality, and say you've got 5 votes, go and vote for something that you think is important. And so there's a democratic element and component to that as well.
A democratic element under your control, based on which is good. I mean,
so everybody sees how many products have had all the votes are public.
No, and that's a good thing. I quite like it, and listening to your customers is a very good thing. But we have to remember that a lot of your customers are stupid, right? So you only listen to so much of it. You get feedback. You remember there's a Simpsons episode when Homer designed a car. Your customers aren't necessarily always going to be the ones who can give you everything. So you listen to 100% of what they say, and then you and your team decide what the heck you're going to do with it.
So I'm just laughing because I know the car's called the Homer, and it has one of everything on it. Sorry, last question. Let's take it from there.
Hi, I'm here with BWA, and we also use Windows Azure at the moment. Clearly, security issues are obviously something that, in everybody's mind when it comes to the cloud. But you've mentioned that there's been a change in attitude. People are more open-minded now to the cloud. Pending that kind of, not pending that, but following that kind of change in mindset, what predispositions do you see with the clients that you're approaching? and what difficulties or other issues are you coming across when you're talking about your product and the cloud to these clients?
It's a big question. So in terms of the predisposition, I mean, really, I think when it comes to what is the number one reason for putting together a cloud-based technology, it's ease. It's making it easy for the client. And the feedback we got following, as I say, our first desktop release is this is good, but you can make it even easier by putting it all in the web. So I think it's more that the sort of feedback we are getting, at least, is that the upside in everything being in the cloud outweighs any sort of latent security concerns they may have. Not to say they don't have them. They still need to actually demonstrate best practices themselves, that they have actually gone through our security procedures and that we have indeed, encrypted data properly and indeed, web traffic is being secured and all that sort of stuff. But that being taken as read, the move is definitely, yes, let's just make this happen. However, I should just slightly qualify that by saying that our clients are smaller, and I'm, no doubt you'll get a different range of responses the larger the incumbent client might be.
I heard an analogy a few weeks ago that I've stolen, and I'm going to keep using it, so feel free to do the same. And we were talking about securing your data, and we were talking about some companies saying it all has to be secured, and others trying to figure out what the difference is. And the analogy is chickens and kittens. So I have a cat. I've got a kitten, all right? I love the cat. We feed it, we cuddle it, we pay attention to it. It sleeps on the foot of the bed. Spent 600 pounds on getting its teeth fixed a few months back, right? So meanwhile, if I had a chicken coop in the back garden with 25 or 30 chickens, and I went out to collect the eggs and there's a dead chicken, I'd just toss it in the bin and buy a new chicken. Right? So if your data is your kitten and it's dear and it's important and you need to take care of it and secure it, if the data is a chicken, it may not be as important. And the size of the customer isn't always as important as it's the nature of the data. Because a 3-doctor NHS trust has got an awful lot more critical data than a 200 plumber chain of plumbers.
Actually, I would just follow that. Absolutely, the nature of the data is critical. So, for us, when we started out, we kind of had 3 categories of data. There's exchange-traded data, which is just there. That's really, anybody can see it. So we didn't even need to encrypt that. There is a client projection market data, which is a little bit more sensitive, but again, it's not exactly the sort of thing which can allow you to find out the economics of the client. And then there's the actual client trade position, which is absolutely got to be completely encrypted. So the level of security absolutely is related to the nature of the data itself. That being said, I think the facility to make this extremely secure across the board is definitely there.
Okay, you can save all your chickens if you like.
Okay, guys, and Gary wants to say something. We're out of time. Okay, well, in that case, it's a slightly shorter panel session, but can I just thank Daniel, George, and Gary? Thank you very much.